Well, you mentioned in that story that you were a pro snowboarder when
Yeah.
you met Hannah.
Yes.
I'm sure that there's some crazy times from that, like some just weird, wild experiences, or like something that you were like, wow, I can't believe I had this opportunity to do something this cool.
Right, because like late 90s,
Yeah,
early
that's the
2000s,
dream.
snowboarding was like,
Yeah.
It
yeah.
was definitely a wild time in snowboarding, you know. It was all about with sponsors back then. It was how big of a scene you could cause. It was all a bad boy image.
Which happens to be Zach Lewis's specials, creating scenes.
Yeah.
Dude's wearing feather earrings right now.
It's just who I am, you know, and it worked out well. I always looked at myself as a salesperson before an athlete, you know. Everywhere we went, I would just go in to any of the shops and I would pitch the spiel on snowboards and shit, and I would end up walking out and like the buyer would be in there and be like, "So this is kind of weird, but I'd like to place an order with you guys. Zach Lewis was just in here and he convinced us to buy like a half dozen of his pro model boards." It's like, that's fucking how it went, dude. But it was awesome. Like the 90s it was like a whole crazy party scene in the action sports industry in the like mid 90s to early 2000s. It wasn't so clean cut and put together as you see today. You know, like X Games, 97.
Yeah.
You know, like 96, 97, 98. Like, I remember in 97 X Games sitting in the athlete tent, and there were a bunch of dudes walking around in these rubber suits with shovels in their hands. And they're like, I was like, dude, and I apologize, it wasn't X Games, it was Extreme Games back then.
Yeah.
I never competed in X Games.
Just
It was Extreme Games. Let's go ahead and get that out there. And so I was just like, this thing will never work. Like, I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I'm sitting here. I was like, and that's when I was like, is snowboarding actually a real sport? Because I'm sitting here in a tent with a bunch of dudes in rubber suits walking around with shovels. And I was like, they're going to go down a mountain at 35 miles an hour sitting on a shovel. The best part is if they fall off that shovel in that rubber suit, they're going to take off. Yeah. They're going to take off to like 90 miles an hour. And at the finish line, they had like this row of hay bales.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, you want those dudes to stop into a row of hay bales at like 90 miles an hour? Are you shitting me? I'm like, they're going to fall off. They're going to light on fire with how fast they take off down that shit.
Dude, I feel like that's what must have been so fun is you were part of like figuring it out. That's always the best part. Like,
how did snowboarding survive and shovel racing not survive?
Because I honestly, like, in all honesty, I would watch that on TV. Are you kidding me? Like,
no, especially because
it's such a spectacle.
I was like starting to get into it too, like. I had
shovel racing?
No. yeah.
Got my pro model.
Yeah, exactly.
Got the
guys
Home Depot carries it.
But they had different categories, right? Like they had stock and then like modified, like pro modified or whatever.
Right.
And where you could do whatever you wanted, like have a space shuttle as long as there was a shovel somewhere involved in the process, and then whoever makes it down the fastest.
Like that Red Bull Flutentog thing, but they did like the shovel one. Yeah,
the precursor.
Because I feel like Red Bull used to do a bunch of cool stuff like that, like the Derby race and like a bunch of stuff.
I think they still do it.
Yeah,
we should do that.
And so the modified shovel, to Dylan's point, was like, yeah, as long as there's a shovel involved, and like these people were coming out with these torpedoes, and like they had the skis mounted on the side. It looked like a drag race vehicle. Had like a 1,600 horsepower engine in the back of this thing, you know, like 17 ponies to give it a running head start next to it. And it's like, where's the shovel involved? Oh, it's the brake. They're gonna like it's like hanging off the ass end of this thing. They're like gonna pull it up, you know, with the shovel turned around backwards, and that's gonna stop it. And I'm like, you guys are insane. But, you know, and they had like during the summer X Games, they had like kayak jumping going on.
I've seen that, yeah.
You know, like
bungee jumping in a kayak.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, this is what the action. So I was like, what did I get myself into? But talk about joy quota.
Yeah.
The Extreme Games truly was joy quota filmed on national television for
Oh.
first
I'd go
couple
bungee
years.
jump in a kayak right now.
That would be so
Like,
hilarious. Yeah,
literally,
it's such
I
a
would leave this to go do that.
dude.
Zach, I love you, but this interview is over.
Yeah.
There's a
It's
kayak outside and a bungee cord, and
Oh.
as far as I know there's a crane downtown because I was jumping off of it a couple days ago.
I don't know. That was somebody else.
And so what's so funny though is like, yeah, that was the time when like, as a whole culture of action sports, we were kind of figuring out what was going to stick, right? Like it was truly just throwing spaghetti against a wall. Like for a while there was extreme ironing. I remember that was the thing. So people would be like
What?
surfboarding
What?
while ironing and shit. Like the wildest stuff.
will
I don't-
disagree with
I
that,
don't
yeah.
No,
remember
I
don't
that.
recall that.
I've seen videos that like people would be like, or like they'd bring an ironing board like halfway up like a giant rock face that they were rock climbing, and they'd like pull out the ironing board and
Well,
like
that's
iron stuff.
probably like.
Are you sure that wasn't
planking
some
or
type of
something, like a
weird
fad
skit
thing.
that they were doing?
No,
Yeah.
I saw like many
That's
things
not
about
like
it.
that wasn't a. That couldn't have been like an X Games type.
No,
sport,
no,
though.
I don't
That was
think
more
it-
just like a fad like planking or.
But that's what I'm
segmented
saying.
kick
Like
in nature.
they were just trying to see what stuck. Like everyone in action sports was like, that's not anti-establishment enough. Like we need to do the craziest, most wildest, stupidest thing. And that had to been such a cool thing to get to be a part of, because I feel like by the time we grew up anyways, like everything had kind of been like segmented into like, oh, this is probably where like BMX is going to be a thing, skateboarding is going to be a thing.
Well, that-
Rollerblading wasn't
rollerblading
going to be
wa-
a thing. Like that got
Yeah,
X'd
how we
out.
decided that.
Yeah,
That's
like
really
as a culture,
interesting.
everyone was like, we're probably not. Like, yeah.
It was crazy because back then like sponsors would throw money at you, and I never was making huge money, but like my snowboard sponsor at the time was giving me $5,000 a month plus $5,000 a month for travel budget to literally go party.
Yeah.
Like Joyride Snowboards was taking good care of me, back then, like in 2000, like they were taking really good care of me. And I
I'd
guess it's
still
like
take that.
2001.
That's still an awesome budget.
And
I feel like
and then,
most athletes probably would struggle to get that now.
Yeah. I don't
you know,
think
and
very few
I stumbled across that one stupidly, like, because that's when actually like board sponsors would actually pay money, because now athletes, all their money comes from energy drinks and clothing. It's not the actual bike companies that are paying the way anymore. When I grew up racing, like when I was racing BMX and stuff, it was the money came from the bike companies. Like if you were racing, that's who your money came from, was GT, Haro, Diamondback. And
Yeah.
now, they aren't paying the athletes anymore. It's coming from Monster, Red Bull, who is sponsoring GT, Haro, whoever it may be.
Yeah,
So-
it's probably like the top 2 or 3 dudes on the team get something, and then everyone else is getting parts and stuff.
Right.
And then you have to kind of figure it out from there.